Hello, my name's Duncan and welcome to Baft Books, as I'm now calling it. I'm just going to say hello to my gorgeous Labrador who makes the piggy-like noises. And there's my little gizmo of a Yorkie down there as well. Might even pop a picture of both of them up there for you to all to see. Well, this is, I'm going to probably call it pick and mix, because this video is going to be a little bit of a selection of various things I'm just going to talk about. Nothing overly specific. I'll probably give it a snappy subtitle if I can think of one. My idea with me talking about books is I'm probably going to put 2 to 3 videos out a week, mainly, and I'm going to try and hit some specific subjects. Like early next week, I'm planning to do one on Christopher Priest and Harlan Ellison about the infamous Dangerous Visions 3, and I'm not sure what the one at the back end of the week is going to be about, but basically I'm going to just be talking about things that really interest me and hopefully a bit more on the obscure side. But I said today is going to be the first of the pick and mix ones, which I'm not saying I'm doing one every week. It'll just be random. I do not think I can really do a Friday reads just because of the way I read. Not the fastest of readers, well, 2 to 3 books a week. And what I'm planning to read, I don't really believe in TBRs. I sort of have an idea of what I'm going to read, and that can frequently change just as soon as I look at my bookshelf and think, okay, I'm going to read that instead. But there's a few things I wanted to just talk about today. I just thought you might find interesting. First one is a couple of days ago I got this week's Times Literary Supplement. I will show you there, which I get on a weekly basis. It's book reviews and articles, or sort of literary world and some interesting subjects. I like it because I like to read good book reviews, even if I don't particularly like the idea of the book, because I like to do a bit of writing myself, and it's just really nice to read good sound. Nice just to read good writing. But there was a couple of things in this week that sort of leapt out at me. The light's changing a bit. It's because the sunlight outside seems to be changing a bit. We had sort of storms yesterday, sort of 70-mile-an-hour winds. Today's not raining, but it's still a bit sort of on the dreek side. And the sun doesn't know what it wants to do. And so I'm using natural light because normally it looks pretty good on my camera. So the first thing that appealed to me is, I'm not sure if you can see that here, there's like a biography of Brian Aldiss out by Paul Kincaid. Brian Aldiss is actually one of my favourite science fiction writers. I sometimes think he's quite underrated, and he wrote so much, lived in Oxford. I think his Heliconia books are masterpieces. And you'll probably hear more about him on this channel because there's quite a few of his books I might consider talking about. And that is out, and that sounds quite interesting. And it's published by, it's just called Brian W. Aldiss by Paul Kincaid. It's actually published by the University of Illinois. And it's just a bit of sort of look into his writing and his career and the sort of subjects that he covered. And the other thing in this week's that leapt out to me, I haven't read it all yet, so there's probably other things in there that'll interest me, but this was like my initial flick through, was a biography of the cyclist Jan Ullrich by, I'm trying to remember the name, Daniel Freeby. And apparently I've heard in a couple of places this is really good. I am quite a big cycling fan. Look at me, you wouldn't think so, but I used to be quite slim and before I got ill, and I used to do lots of cycling, especially in the 90s, and so some of the big names. But Jan Ullrich, if you don't know, he won the Tour de France in '97. He was a fantastic cyclist, and he basically, after that, he was always seemed to come second place. In 2006, the year after Lance Armstrong's famous drug emissions, he was suspended the day before the Tour de France by his team. And this is basically his story, and apparently it is very well done. There's a little bit at the end I will read out to you, which makes it sound really interesting reading. And if I can, I might see if I can pick a copy of this up. This extensive, thoughtful study concludes with the image of a damaged and vulnerable man careering into depression. For most of 4 years, I sat in my house and looked out of the window. An addiction once claimed to have smoked 999 cigarettes in 9 hours, a world record. Or it became, as another banned cyclist put it, the ultimate missile that never got used, a benign force that makes him a perfect counterpoint to Armstrong. And the whole thing just really, really appeals to me as a cycling fan, and even just as someone who likes to read biographies. So I think that's going to be on my list of things to keep an eye out for and maybe get in the future. So as for my reading this week, if you saw my little video I did last week, I told you about my opinion of TBR list. I told you vaguely what I might be considering reading. Well, I finished, what was I? One book, and I ended up going to an old favourite, Anne McCaffrey, The Skies of Pern, which was the last of this timeline of the Dragon Riders of Pern books. I just had this urge to read it because I don't really like it, and it's just a really comforting read. And the thing about McCaffrey is I always find her writing style really comfortable, and it's just a really straightforward read. I'm still, for some reason, it's taken me far longer than it should do, reading Arthur Haley's Hotel, which I talked about last week. I'm about 60% of it through, I think. And I'm really enjoying it, and the writing style's good, but for some reason it seems to be taking me a lot longer to read than a book like that should do. But sometimes that just happens when you're reading, I think. So those are the main things, and I was just looking forward to, I know people get a little obsessed with Halloween and that. I'm not a big Halloween fan, but I was looking around and I noticed that Steve Donahue and I think Micah Cummings were going to do a read of Dracula, and everybody normally does Dracula. I discovered that on Kindle site you could get hold of a Stoker book I've not read. Let me just have a look at this. So I'm looking at man, looking at a Kindle. It's not particularly, it's interesting. Trying to get to the front page second. Yeah, I downloaded from Amazon The Jewel in the Stars. You can, it's free because it's copyright free. There is a Penguin version, which I might put a pretty picture of it up there for you, and it's basically set in Egypt. There is a film called The Awakenings with good old Charlton Heston in. That's totally The Awakening, which is based on this. And I've never read that book. That was written in 1903, and I thought, okay, I might see if I can read that this month. I said I never put any, what I may or may not read changes randomly all the time. But I thought that could be quite an interesting read since I've never read it. I don't think it's particularly long. And I said I've not read Dracula for years either, but I just thought something a bit different too. And then I just thought I'd have a quick look at some of my selections I think might be worth anybody looking out for if you want to look for some vague sort of horror books. Basically one of my favourite, obviously you've got H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is my favourite, I'm sorry, he is. So there's a couple of books here. This is Selected Tales, this is Oxford World's Classics, and I have a big soft spot for World's Classics, and in lots of cases I prefer them to the Penguin ones. This is some Selected Tales of his, and just have a quick look and tell you which ones are in here. There's a huge introduction written by somebody, I can't remember who, and the introductions on these World's Classics are always interesting. It's got things like The Fall of the House of Usher and classics like that in. I've also got this one that I actually found in a charity shop a while ago, which is actually a Wordsworth Classics, which I've never picked up, which is just basically the Tales of Mystery and Imagination, which has got a lot of stuff in. One I've had for a while that I've not got around to reading, I've never read it, is The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. This is a non-horror one as far as I understand, and apparently it's quite underrated. And I said this is the World's Classics version, and I'm actually looking forward to reading that at some point in the future. I will say this a lot, I'm looking forward to reading it. But obviously people think about things like Mary Shelley as well, and this sort of thing about Frankenstein. I've got a really good biography here by Muriel Spark of Mary Shelley, which is another one that I am waiting to read at some point. which I found quite a while ago. So that's got good ones. Now, if you want to go to Lovecraft, I've got this one's. This is the omnibus one. This is at the Mountains of Madness. There was 3 books in this set. There's quite a few different. This one's now a print as far as I know, and it's got this gorgeous tin white cover. There is 3 books in it, and I'd like to get the other 2. This one I brought in the 80s when this covered version was originally released, and it was like my introduction to it, which is why I quite like to get the other 2. I know there's various Lovecraft collections. If you look at Michael K. Vaughan's channel, I think he shows you lots of them because he's a big Lovecraft fan. So that's always worth having a look at some Lovecraft if you've never read any Lovecraft. I have also, a friend of mine gave me this book. There's a second volume of this. This is called The Black Winds of the Cthulhu, which is actually a selection of short stories written by various different authors, all based around the feeling of sort of Lovecraft's universe. It's edited by S.T. Joshi, who I don't know, but there's stories from him. There's ones from Michael Shear, Sean Gafford, Derek Piper, Brian Stapleford's in here, Philip Hadelman, some vaguely known names. This is quite an interesting read. It's just people's take on Lovecraft's world. So that's just a slightly different one to have a look at. And I'm going to now suggest my favourite Stephen King novel, which is Salem's Lot. I'm not a big King fan, but for vampire novels, Salem's Lot. I did have my original version of Salem's Lot was brought in the early 80s, and I had the great book cull of the 1990s, which basically meant that I moved a lot and lots of my books went missing. I lost so many, but I found this in a charity shop a while ago, and this is a newer version of Salem's Lot. And what I like about this one is, if you can look at it, the way it is set out and the font and that, it's really, really a nice version to read. Oh, this nice size font. It's all separated up, like the little chapters work well, and it's just a nice, comfortable book to read, which I think some people could learn off that. So that's probably my favourite Stephen King book. Obviously, I love The Stand and a few others. I've never really got into a lot of his later stuff, though I did read quite a few years ago Hearts in Atlantis, which I really liked. I know that's not really later stuff, that's from the back end of the 90s, I think, if I remember rightly. But Stephen King is just a really entertaining writer. I know if you look around that Steve Donahue hates him, which I find entertaining, but I really, really do like him. So that's sort of some selections of books I thought you might be interested in. And as I said, this is just a bit of a pick and mix. And just a few of the books that I've got here that I think could be worth your while. I think that might be it. Oh, another thing that I was going to say. I'm going to put a little bit of cut here, and I will be back in 2 seconds.
Now it's time for ice cream. Or maybe some nuts. A cool glass of orange. Why not try a hot dog? Or the real thing, a cool, refreshing Coca-Cola. From the sales staff and in the foyer. Now.
Yes, I'm back. Hey, Micah. A while ago, I picked up some old Omni magazines. If you're too young to know, back in the 70s, early 80s, there was a sort of popular science and mystery science fiction magazine called Omni. I got a few at the time, but that was it. But somebody was selling a huge job lot on eBay that I got for silly cheap money, considering how much they actually do go for. He was totally underpricing them. Here's one of them. This is the anniversary issue in here. Here's one of them, and they are in great condition. And they have huge amounts of alcohol and tobacco adverts that you would never see nowadays. Making alcohol and tobacco look incredibly exciting. So we can find an example of one of these adverts. Great advert here for Casio calculators. And now we all have one on our phone. Some cameras. You can see the sort of market they were dealing to. I said so many alcohol ads. This actually doesn't seem to have huge amounts of smoking ads compared to some of the other issues I've got. But anyway, I am going to probably do a video on some of these, maybe on separate issues. I have got, they published some original fiction. I've got the first one that actually has a copy of George R. Martin's short story Sand Kings, which is a great story. There was actually a TV version done in the reboot of the Outer Limits in the mid-80s, but that was his first time publishing the story, and I've got it in the original Omni magazine. I think I might actually just sit there and go through the magazines with you if anybody's actually interested in that. Well, I'm interested in it, so hopefully you might be. And yeah, that was just one other thing that I wanted to put in this little sort of pick and mix section. So hopefully this hasn't been too boring with me rambling on. If you want to put any comments, please pop them down below. I'll happily reply and talk to you about any of this. I said hopefully getting another 2 to 3 videos out next week. So I'm trying to be consistent, just so that if anybody's actually interested in what I'm talking about, they know that there's stuff coming out weekly. I said before, I write my own blog. I've been a bit lax recently just due to personal matters, so I'm hoping to get some good things up there. There's going to be some more reviews and stuff coming up soon. There'll be links down below. Go and look at it if you want to. It's just a thing that I enjoy doing, some of the writing. But if not, I hope you all have a good weekend, and I can hear the rain outside again. Thank you all very much, and I will see you again soon, all my imaginary people.